Hi everyone, let's get started. I am super excited because we have something in the pipeline that we've had in the pipeline for a while, which was a cybersecurity webinar. And now today, finally, we that has come to fruition, and we have some of the best experts in the industry here with us right now. And they will share a lot of insights and different vantage points for cybersecurity. So I'm thrilled. Before we get started, just a quick introduction. I'm Priya. Thank you for joining us today. We are excited to present to you a topic on cybersecurity. I am delighted to have a fantastic group of experts here, and they'll share the insights. Now, for those of you who may not be familiar with RegDesk, we are an AI-powered RIM platform with integrated regulatory intelligence. Any regulatory team or associates can leverage AI. You can prepare, manage, and publish international submissions smarter and faster. That's the whole point. If you'd like to learn more or have any specific questions about your business needs and your desire for a RIM solution or regulatory intelligence, we'd be more than happy to schedule a call to discuss further. And we can definitely add a link to schedule a call with us in the chat feature if need be. Now, I'm about to introduce our panel today, and if you have any specific questions for them, please, you can address them in the QA box at the bottom of the screen. We'll aggregate all the questions and wait till the end to address all of them. In case we don't get to your questions, don't worry, we will try to address them via email for you, or you can always email us as well. Also, if you'd like to get in touch with any of the experts today, please let us know. We'd be more than happy to make that connection, and that way you can leverage their expertise and services. So first of all, we have Christy Mazzarisi who is a principal consultant at Network Partners NPG. She's the head of quality systems with a broad background in pharmaceutical and laboratory sciences, with R&D and commercial manufacturing experience for both sterile and non-sterile devices. Christy has over 17 years of industry practice. Her overall background and specialties include GMP, GLP, strategic management of major programs such as gap analysis, transformation of product quality systems, SOP transformation and optimization, QMS framework, operational system audits, and you name it. So Christy, we've worked with Christy, and she truly is an expert in on the quality side. So if you need any help or assistance in this area, please reach out to us, and we'd love to connect you with Christy and her group. Christy, also is very passionate about continuous improvement activities, and is consistently building quality in each area of the life sciences. She's also an advocate and gala committee member for the Tourette Association of America, advocate for Make-A-Wish Foundation in New Jersey, and a PowerShift ambassador for Shark Tank's Damon John, which is pretty neat. I'd like to next introduce our second panelist, Jason Vanzin. He's the CEO and founder of Right Hand Technology Group, a leader in IT, cybersecurity, and compliance services. With over 25 years of experience, Jason is a cybersecurity expert, specializing in protecting small to medium-sized enterprises, and also works with U.S. Department of Defense contractors. He holds certifications such as CI, SSP, and ABCP, which underscore his expertise in information security and business continuity. Jason is known for his strategic approach to cybersecurity and has been recognized as a thought leader in the field. So we are super excited to have Jason on our panel today. And lastly, we have Gabriel. Gabriel is the Director of Solutions at Krix, a platform that is purpose-built. So now we have consulting, we have QMS, and now we're talking about a cybersecurity platform for life sciences teams to improve quality and release software faster. Gabriel joined Krix after working at Amgen, where he led the application of AI and machine learning to improve drug manufacturing operations. Before Amgen, he managed the MITRE Corporation Cybersecurity Innovation Portfolio and led research teams focused on device security and cyber physical systems. Gabriel holds a Master of Science in Electrical Engineering and Computer Science and a Master of Business Administration from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT. So we couldn't have had a better panel. If you guys again have for our participants have any specific questions for each panelist, please feel free to pose that question in the Q&A chat bot at the bottom of the screen. I want to start out. So I've done these intros. That's great, but I would love for, if you don't mind, just if if you can give a brief description of how your vantage point on cybersecurity, how you have helped companies, especially we have med tech companies here, how you've helped or your organizations have helped medical device companies with cybersecurity. That would be a great starting point before we dive deeper into our questions. Jason, do you want to go first?
Sure, sure. Yeah, typically we help companies basically start up and run their cybersecurity programs. So obviously we always start off with the gap analysis, figure out what gaps they have, and then help them close those gaps. We kind of act as that management level cybersecurity role, virtual CISO. And then we have everything from top to bottom as far as whatever gaps they have. We're able to fill them in with managed services, engineers, people. But the thing I always see our clients struggle with is that kind of management and understanding how to run a cyber program. And that's where we come in. So they don't have to hire a full-time resource, which, is very, very expensive to hire somebody at a CISO level. So, and we kind of bridge the gap between IT and management when it comes to cybersecurity, compliance, and then sometimes we get pulled into the IT as well because we have done a lot of IT work. So I don't know if there's anything in particular you want me to cover, but that's kind of our where we come in.
So Jason, you work and your team works with the IT groups at MedTech and Life Sciences. Would that be
Yeah,
accurate?
so yeah, typically our clients have IT people, so we work with them. It's very hard for management to manage things they don't understand. So like, for say a CFO to have to manage the IT department and the cybersecurity department when he doesn't understand what they're talking about. So we're able to kind of do that and speak in uh, business terms and risk, which is ultimately what they're worried about is risk management. So yeah, we're typically, but we do have some smaller companies where we will do everything. We'll be the IT, the cyber, and help them with compliance.
Fantastic. And for again our attendees, if you're part of discussions, you may not be directly involved with cybersecurity or IT, but if you hear or overhear people talking about a gap or they don't know where to go for cybersecurity, Jason and his team are it for you. So feel free to reach out to them. Christy, I know you're coming from the quality standpoint, which is quite relevant to our attendees who are regulatory quality. Where does your company and where do you come into play when it comes to cybersecurity?
So my perspective on this is more, like you said, from the quality and regulatory side of things. So I'm really looking at the regulations, the guidances, and how can we implement that within our organizations. So my company really can support more around auditing for gaps around your maybe your computer system validation activities, which touch on cybersecurity a little bit there, really more focused around how are you protecting your data. Most of the companies we work with are all in the life sciences, so pharmaceutical, biotech, med devices. How are they protecting the data that comes from those, the data in their clinical research? How are they safeguarding that? And then what does their risk management process look like? And we can kind of help guide them around that. So that's kind of how I look at it, more from an oversight and governance perspective. How are we overseeing companies and their cybersecurity programs and how they're protecting their data? So that's kind of where I come in.
Fantastic. And Gabriel, your company has built a platform. So can you talk a little bit about that? I know you talked about, I introduced you and your company to work with pharmaceuticals but you also work with a lot of leading med tech companies. So can you please talk a little bit about that?
It's on mute. Thank you, Priya. So just building on what Christy said, one of the main guidances that came out last year from the FDA on cybersecurity really brought cybersecurity into quality systems. So anywhere where risk is discussed, you have to consider cybersecurity. And what we've seen is within large organizations, this creates two main challenges that prevent one of the key activities that the FDA is looking for, which is the post-market management of vulnerabilities. And those two challenges are, one, that the R&D teams and the product security teams are disconnected. So there's not an easy way for teams to share information, whether that's cybersecurity requirements, security risk controls, and evidence that those are implemented. So that's a main challenge that we focus on. And then the second one is around the software supply chain for organizations is typically quite fragmented. You have many different teams building many different software supply chains and not having the ability to share information across teams, which increases overall cyber risk for products. Today, at Ketrix, we connect into commonly used developer tools, including product security tools, and allow you to create kind of an end-to-end closed loop quality system that includes cybersecurity. And we, strongly believe that integrating these tools, including your product security tools, is critical in order for you to automate the necessary documentation, enforce your procedures from within your quality management system to ultimately release software faster and meet the mandates that have been laid out by the FD&C Act to support a regular justifiable cycle for security patches, as well as those out of cycle patches for critical vulnerabilities. So, for this discussion, any discussion around kind of tooling, how companies should think about their process, more than happy to contribute insights that we've received from some of the largest medtech companies.
Fantastic. I wanna ask more of a general question to start off with, which is for the panel, and any of you can start, but from your different perspectives, what are the most common cybersecurity threats that you're seeing that businesses are facing today?
Sure, I can start off. I think a lot of them are, things we've heard about, phishing and ransomware, insider threats. Supply chain, as you were just talking about, is a huge one. Like most of the major breaches we're seeing are coming through the supply chain. I was just buying my wife a new car last night and talking to the dealership about the big CDK breach that took down like most of the dealer or half the dealerships. That came through supply chain. So that's like people are getting more critical of like who am I working with, what are their security measures that they have in place, and then with AI and deep fakes and everything coming down, getting more and more sophisticated. That's also kind of moving in. It's kind of in the same realm of phishing and social engineering, but it's getting a lot more sophisticated. There's been, I think, KnowBe4, who's actually a cybersecurity training company, hired somebody that was out of North Korea. So that like there's a lot of like of this social engineering automated with AI that is getting very convincing that there have to be obviously the good guys are going to have to develop technologies that kind of counteract that, but got to kind of be suspicious. I mean, I think we're all real, but maybe one of you guys are a deep fake, but yeah, those are some of the things I think, just thinking about, since COVID with the telemedicine and now with like deep fakes and everything and all this information on the dark web, there's a lot of risks, I guess, that are getting worse, over time here. So those are kind of the big ones I usually see, and then obviously vulnerabilities. Again, I know medical devices are a big thing, but manufacturing as well sees, has tons of internet connected devices. Each one of those expands the footprint that could be attacked. And then if you're not maintaining them, I think 40% of all breaches come from unpatched vulnerabilities. So that's another big area.
Yeah, and I kind of wanted to add to that, Jason, when you look at it, the life science space, um, the type of information that our companies hold, like you mentioned, the medical devices, and they're now connected to apps and things like that, right? The data breaches that can happen in the life sciences is probably huge because of the type of data that we hold, right? Patient data, um, intellectual property around product development, how those things are being made, all the clinical data and research, where the life sciences is a big target in this space.
Yeah, absolutely. And building on kind of both of you, the challenge around kind of interconnectivity and connected devices. Hospitals are networked. The number of devices that are connected to networks is ever increasing, and so therefore the complexity of managing kind of all of these systems is only growing. And the FDA has commented on this. You need to, in your submissions, talk about interoperability considerations and think about how your devices could be impacted by the environment of use where the device is deployed. And there's even discussion, and requirements to report on potential kind of multi-patient harm around this interoperability consideration. How can one device that is very homogeneous to a bunch of other devices that are deployed in a hospital potentially impact many patients? Because at the end of the day, when we think about cybersecurity, it's about protecting the data of our customers, our patients, as well as the safety of our patients at the end of the day.
Yes, very true. I think we would all concur the impact of a cybersecurity breach is significant and massive because of patient data and product data, a lot of IP involved. So that being said, in your opinion and your practices, how can organizations effectively navigate evolving cybersecurity regulations?
Well, one of the things when I look at it, and again from the life science perspective, is looking at your guidance documents, and regulatory documents from the FDA. They emphasize a total product lifecycle approach for cybersecurity, starting from pre-market all the way through your post-market requirements, which I think Gabriel touched on a bit earlier. Really focusing on risk management. It's all around risk-based approaches these days, even to things like cybersecurity. So to me, that's one way to navigate the ever-changing landscape, but also having a really good, robust post-market surveillance program, and active monitoring programs in place, because I think that's some of the biggest challenges that I know I hear clients talk about, and that I've seen across the landscape. So, if you don't have the right people involved, find the experts that can help you do this, if you don't have them internally. So, collaboration with third-party vendors, consultants who are experienced in this can help conduct audits, help do those risk assessments to make sure you're mitigating things effectively. That's one way to keep up.
Yeah, and building on that, Christy, I think the post-market surveillance program is so critical. But in the end of the day, the challenge that at least we see many of our customers face is how do you do this practically? Typical. Let's think about the typical supplier quality assessment. You're typically doing those 10 or 100 supplier quality assessments. But now, if we move into this cyber world where we're managing a software supply chain, we have thousands of suppliers, thousands of open source packages that we need to rely on to build modern cloud-enabled medical device software. And the same is true for if we think about the traditional supplier quality assessment notification, or in the cyber world, vulnerabilities. It's moving from quarterly to potentially receiving daily alerts that you have vulnerabilities. So on both sides, it's considering how you need to adapt your QMS so that you have processes to, in a lean, streamlined way, manage these supplier quality assessments and supplier quality notification assessments within this new world of cybersecurity. And then the other side is tooling, which I always love to talk about because that's what we provide. But ensuring that the tooling that you have can support that faster moving life cycle.
And
Yeah,
Chris,
no. Okay.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna ask, since we're talking about the tools and post-market surveillance, have you have you worked with, uh, I guess not each other even, but maybe with each other in for different clients, or how have you seen it work out where a company had a tool and how that tool, like what you have, Gabriel, feeds into what Christie's team would need?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So there's two sides to it, and I give kind of a case study. We're working with a large kind of top five medtech company that currently is managing a significant amount of the cyber risk and um, I would say this documentation within Excel and a number of product security tools. And what we're doing is coming in and helping them digitize all of that cyber risk assessment information, real-time vulnerability monitoring, and connect that into the R&D activities where cybersecurity requirements are documented, safety risks are documented, and then all the verification and validation evidence to show that those controls are properly implemented. Now, it's great to have amazing tooling, but if your quality management system requires you to do, some old process that's more suited for a traditional, supplier, you're going to become overrun. So that's typically where an organization would engage someone with Christy's expertise, and Christy can speak more to that. But to someone to come in and evaluate their QMS and ensure that it's in alignment with the regulations and that it can support the volume of analysis that's going to be required in a post-market cyber world.
Yeah, and I think, when it comes to your quality management system, um, it needs to be scalable and flexible. And a lot of companies do tend to have this out of the box rigid QMS that doesn't necessarily fit with their procedures. So I always try and tell everybody, focus on your internal processes first and then build your QMS around that. And then build it so it can be easily changed and flexed as you grow and as your as your products maybe grow. You want it to be able to be adaptable, to keep up with the regulations because things are changing all the time. And then, we are not the IT experts at my company. We focus on quality and regulatory at Network Partners Group, but that's where we would engage with folks like Jason and Gabriel to kind of support us and, create partnerships to really help our clients to be more of a one-stop shop.
Makes sense. And Jason, you were going to add something.
Uh, I was going to say, I think also adopting like standards and frameworks. So whether that's ISO or NIST, I mean, typically a lot of the regulations are kind of utilizing them as their foundation. So kind of following one of those for your cyber program, because ultimately a lot all these regulations are about cybersecurity. So if you have a good cybersecurity program in the first place, you're kind of, that much closer to what you're going to need to be when when you try to get compliant. And then also, I think one of the challenges, I mean, we see, I don't know if you guys see it, but it's just management kind of abdicating responsibility to somebody that, and then kind of not following up on it. So it kind of gets abdicated to the IT department or something because they're technical people and this is a technical problem. And then they just kind of forget about it. So management, cybersecurity, it doesn't work without management support. So I think management setting their objectives and their goals and then following up on them through, a cybersecurity steering committee or something like that, where they're staying in the loop and making sure that those things are actually being done. Because a lot of times you build out processes, you find out someone left the company and all of a sudden the process left with them because they were the ones doing it. So those are just a couple of things I wanted to add.
With cybersecurity regulations changing, and we're talking about FDA, and then there's European Union and other countries. How does one keep up with cybersecurity changes and regulations? Any tips on that? And also, any key steps to even establishing an effective cybersecurity protocol and procedure within the organization? For the large medtech companies, it's easier where for smaller companies with limited resources, how do can they keep up and then also establish cybersecurity?
Gabriel, I think you were going to say something.
Yeah, well, and actually, thanks, Jason. It relates to this, which is that kind of governance or steering committee. I think the advice that I can give is it's for the larger companies, which I think have the challenge of a tension between centralizing certain parts of the governance process into a corporate or business unit level function, or pushing it down towards the product security teams that are engaged in the day-to-day R&D and cybersecurity activities. So I think companies need to be careful around what parts of governance are put where. Typically, what we recommend is at the business unit level. This is where regulatory intelligence would sit. Those folks that are utilizing a platform like Reg Desk to stay abreast of everything that's going on from a regulatory perspective, as well as monitoring compliance and potentially looking at kind of these post-market cyber metrics that the FDA is asking for at a business unit level, along with identifying certain key resources that can be shared among the business units. Common ones include that we see are kind of cyber risks, common cyber risks and cyber risk assessments so that people can learn from each other, as well as metadata about the software supply chain. There's a lot of metadata that FDA requires you to collect on particular dependencies in your software supply chain. And by centralizing that, that can help your teams move faster. With respect to managing vulnerabilities and approving what third-party software can be deployed within your product, we typically recommend that that be done closer to the R&D teams, which is typically with the product team that's paired with that product team. The key part there is we need the product team still to move fast, and those that are closest to that work have the best opportunity to help that happen.
Which question are we on?
Just the protocols, yeah. How does one establish? How does one keep up with the changes? And also, not just for the US FDA, companies are global. How do you create effective cybersecurity protocols that meet requirements at a global level?
So I think I can pick up on some of that. I'm used to working globally across global regulations, not just the FDA in the US. But if you look at, med device companies, EU MDR, right? IVDR in Europe. If you look at really all the regulations, right? And from wearing my quality hat, everything around cybersecurity focuses on risk management throughout the entire product lifecycle. So if you just take it back to the basics, sometimes I, remind folks is, let's not overcomplicate things. Let's take it back to the basics. And it's all around risk. So one of the things that I say is a key step in your, cybersecurity process is conducting that initial risk assessment. And then it should be a living document. Your risk assessment should not be something that is static. It should be dynamic and continuously reassessed as new things come up, as you introduce new platforms, and making sure you're evaluating all your threats or risks in advance and have proper mitigations in place. So to me, that's one of the first things I think of is, well, where's your risk assessment, around your cybersecurity protocols? That's one of the things I would look for if I was coming in for an audit. What are you guys doing? What does your program look like? And then Gabriel mentioned governance. So that's big for me is what does oversight and governance look like? Clear roles and responsibilities in your cybersecurity process. Maybe in your incident reporting process or your response planning, business continuity planning. What does all that look like? And making sure you have clear roles and responsibilities throughout all of those processes. And that's even big, on the European side with the EMA is oversight and governance. So focusing on that is going to be important to keep up as well.
Yeah, I think also kind of establishing what metrics. Again, I'm always, we're always dealing with the leadership. So, if I go in there and just start talking a bunch of techie and get kind of detailed, they're gonna get real bored real quick. So if I can figure out what metrics can show them the effectiveness of the program and then show them those metrics on a regular basis, they start seeing, okay, well, we were, like when we're in line and somebody would say the NIST cybersecurity framework or ISO, we're using some type of scoring, like you're 80% compliant. And then, if that goes down, then they're going to say, hey, what's going on? And then we could answer what's going on and then, hopefully drive some decisions, if things aren't getting done that need to be done. But like, what are those metrics that are going to help management make sure that what they think is in place is actually working and effective. Um, I'd say that's another thing that helps keep those security protocols on the track.
And just to build on that, Jason, and I don't mean just to bring up FDA, but some of the common metrics that the regulatory bodies are looking at for cybersecurity from a product perspective are defect density. So how many of the vulnerabilities that exist in your product or in the software have been patched. Then there's kind of how long does it take from when a vulnerability is reported to when you've developed a patch for that vulnerability. And then the final one is from the development of a patch, how long does it take you to actually implement that patch in the server where your software runs, the devices that your customers are using. So those are kind of three key metrics that any organization needs to be able to measure and at some level monitor.
And then as companies are adopting new technologies, how does that affect cybersecurity strategies? So you have that in place. How do you, I guess, cover and encompass any new technology that medtech companies might be working towards, any new innovation? How do you adopt that? Gabriel, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think there's two main areas. Jason mentioned kind of AI, generative AI, and kind of these new modalities that we're bringing into products, and they bring their own risks. So, can you potentially introduce bias into your models? Can you potentially have adversarial, machine learning attacks against your products? These are all things that need to be considered within a new framework when you adopt a new technology. And the key thing is, with respect to regulators, they're not only looking at intentional foreseeable misuse of cyber devices, but also unintentional. So is there something about the increased complexity of the system that you're building, dependent upon these new technologies, that are increasing the risk of unintentional foreseeable misuse of the device? And then on the other side, with all these new technologies, particularly in the transition from kind of embedded software in devices, which has typically been of a simpler architecture, moving into cloud and offering, cloud services that connect to these end devices, it's just way more complex. A lot more third-party software that you have to rely on. And with that, all of the challenges that I've kind of been harping on around kind of approving that software for use within your organization and managing and mitigating vulnerabilities that's reported against it.
Yeah, I think kind of to add to that, building risk management into your change control or your project management is a big thing companies should be doing. Using AI to help you think of those risks, assuming you're not putting in anything that's, maybe IP that you don't want in the system. But sometimes, you can kind of think it through the risk yourself, but then running it through AI, it can come up with some additional risks you didn't think of. Um, but I would say also some of the challenges, talking about devices connecting to the cloud is just like if people don't have their current, you know, basically attack service mapped out with data flow diagrams and infrastructure diagrams, it's kind of hard to know how everything pieces together when you're bringing something new into it. So like making sure that stuff's all identified up front and documented, and then you're thinking about adopting a new technology. Okay, how does this fit into our current data flow and our current infrastructure? What How does it expand the attack surface? And then what risks does that bring to what type of data? Again, I always like to mention the first area of the NIST cybersecurity framework is identify, and I see a lot of people just fall down right there and not identifying everything. So I think that's also when you're adopting new technologies, if you don't know what your current technologies are, it's going to make it hard to evaluate it properly.
I want to build just on something that Jason said around threat modeling and making sure you do that cyber risk assessment, and the importance of doing that early in the development process, and critically engaging all of the stakeholders. So getting you can't do threat modeling in a silo. You need to engage R&D. You can't do threat modeling in a silo. You have to engage people that have clinical understanding. Cybersecurity is a very multidisciplinary sport, And it's even more interdisciplinary in the life sciences because we bring safety and kind of the clinical impacts of what we're developing. So making sure you engage all stakeholders in the threat modeling process is pretty critical.
Christy, anything from your angle of?
I think they said it best. Again, for me, it's all about risk, right? Identifying the risks, having it be, like I said before, that living document, right? If you introduce something new, it's time to reevaluate, right? And keep that document up to date. So really understanding, okay, now that we're introducing something new, how does that affect the systems we already have in place? And I think Jason touched on most of it already, is understanding what you have and then introducing something new. What does that mean to what you have, and as well as what you're implementing? So risk assessments should be done every time something new is introduced. And then also look at your response plan. That should also be reevaluated. So for me, it all goes back to risk management.
Yes, makes complete sense. And that's very relevant to the regulatory role, is to ensure that the risk documents are always up to date. So regarding cybersecurity and this being still fairly new for organizations, what role does employee training play in building a strong cybersecurity culture? And within, employees and the roles, where do you see the training happening? Is it across the entire organization, or you find that certain roles within the organization are the only ones getting trained on cybersecurity?
So I don't mind touching on this one first, because training for me as a quality and regulatory professional is super important. So I think even for cybersecurity, training is going to play a major role, and it needs to be company wide, and it really should be advocated and come from the top down. It should be a major priority, especially for our life science companies, with the type of data and information that we have in our platforms. To me, training, it can help empower the staff to recognize and respond to threats more appropriately. Training is going to be key to having personnel really be aware of what's going on, what new threats look like, how can they report those properly and fast. One of the weakest links in the cybersecurity space or our defense mechanisms are really human error. So the training across the company is going to be really important to empowering our people to do the right things at the right times. So I think you should have some type of regular training in your training program or your curricula around cybersecurity, and even some simulations, things that look real, to try and, catch them off guard so they can see what it really looks like. So that's another big one. And I see a lot of companies implementing those, across the board, and for a while now, actually. So that's kind of just my take on it, is training is key when it comes to cybersecurity.
Yeah, I agree with all that. Yeah, I think kind of like the technology evolving and the threats evolving, the training has to evolve with it. There's a lot of people are doing the phishing simulations, which, we've been doing for a while. I don't think they're doing them enough because we constantly battle with like, well, they already get so much spam, and it's like, well, my additional one email that I'm using for a test, is it really going to, flood their inbox? So we often get people wanting to do it like quarterly or annually or biannually. And it's just like, well, you need to test like weekly, if you ask me. But also again, kind of like we see people falling for phone calls, like people calling saying they're from a bank or whatever it might be, and then tricking the employee into giving information over the phone. So like having the ability to test that. Again, talking about the deep fakes and meetings, we pretty much live in virtual meetings anymore. So like making sure people are aware of those things. Um, I would say we have to adapt the training as well. And then training is kind of a broad topic, right? Like you're talking about regulations, like what part of the regulation does like that individual or that role need to know? So you need to make sure they're trained on those as well. So there's a lot of training. There's definitely probably not enough effort put it behind them, but all that kind of needs to be covered for it to be effective.
Yeah, I think related to the training piece and kind of what parts of the regulations a person is responsible for is key, and understanding accountability. So who's accountable for a particular part of the cybersecurity process? And I think a mistake that can be made, which is analogous, like it has an analogous situation in kind of quality, is to expect that the product security team is kind of running around the R&D team, helping them make their product secure. When really the R&D team, the folks that are developing the product, need to be accountable for its security, and that the product security team is a set of experts that can come in and advise and help analyze whether it's the threat model or the cyber risk assessment. Something similar happens with quality assurance, where the expectation is that quality assurance is running around ensuring that the product is of high quality, versus quality being instilled within the folks that are developing the product, and that it's just a part of the R&D process.
Yeah, it goes back to kind of changing the employee mindset, right? Almost like a quality culture. Training is part of that, creating that proactive mindset to be looking for threats, to be aware, to be paying attention, right? It's empowering the team and building kind of a different way of thinking.
For small to mid-sized businesses, and we've talked about all of this and what the training, having protocols, cybersecurity protocols in place. But with, again, coming back to small to mid-sized businesses, how can they improve their cybersecurity posture, if you will, with limited resources? What are some of the key, if you have any tips on what they can do today or in the short term?
Sure, I'll talk a little bit about that. I guess, you got two consultants on here, so, you probably engage a good consultant that can help you, with even if you have a limited IT team, they can work with the IT team to get this stuff done. But also, again, going back to identify, prioritizing what's critical and, what has the biggest risk. It's kind of like if you open a jewelry store, you got jewels in there you're protecting, you're gonna put security in, but the more jewelry you get and the more expensive that jewelry gets, the more you're gonna invest in your cybersecurity. You're probably not gonna worry about the shed out back that has the lawnmower and the snowblower in it. So making sure you get the right things, the most risky things addressed first. I would say is probably the first thing, and then employee training, as we mentioned, employees being kind of the number one entry point. It's not that expensive to get them trained, but it's going to have the biggest impact.
And I'll jump in. I think, Chris, you might echo this, but there's kind of a risk-based approach on cybersecurity policy as the organization as a whole. But then there's also the risk-based approach kind of in the development of the product and kind of within the quality system. So making sure that you don't develop procedures that are total overkill for the risk class of a product that you're building, or even the risk class of the component that the team is building. So being able to take a risk-based approach is critical. And then the other two areas, is automating as much as possible, automating documentation, taking advantage of modern tools to help shift left your cybersecurity process. The later you find a potential defect or vulnerability in your product, the more expensive it is for the organization to resolve it. So while it seems like significant investment up front to have the right threat model, to have the right cybersecurity risk assessment, in the end, that's going to save you money and time.
Yeah, I think just laying a good foundation up front for a small to mid-sized company is going to be, the key piece is having that foundation be strong and maybe investing a lot of effort in the beginning. But once you have that, outsource the monitoring, if you don't have the resources internally to do so, kind of like what Jason mentioned, find folks that can help you do it and do it, better, and maybe not utilizing your day-to-day resources. And then the employee training is the biggest piece. Again, back to what Jason was saying, doesn't take a lot of effort to do it, but is going to be really key to reducing your errors and the incidents that occur. So, I'm kind of on the same page as Jason and Gabriel there.
Yeah, because though the activity may seem redundant, like what Jason was saying, but the impact of when there is a cybersecurity issue is massive. So put in that effort. It's okay to get some extra emails from the IT to just keep monitoring that activity. We're all, vendors here. What are the best practices that you suggest for medtech companies to, when working with vendors, what should they look for? What are the best practices to establish cybersecurity or to outsource some of the effort? How
So
should they determine who the right vendor, who the right partner is?
So for me, from a quality perspective, bringing on new vendors, supplier management is a big part of what we do. So to me, it's having a strong partnership with your vendors. If they're building your cybersecurity program for you, or if they're a vendor where they could introduce possible risks to your property or your product, having a strong partnership with proper oversight and governance procedures in place, a really strong quality agreement around who's doing what and when is going to be important with your vendors. And then, conducting regular audits, and taking that risk-based approach to auditing. Not everyone needs necessarily the same type of audit or the same vigor behind it, but make sure you're looking at every vendor and also doing risk assessments against each of your vendors, right? And what they introduce coming in. Do they introduce more risk or less? And if so, how do we mitigate that from a cybersecurity perspective? And then the partnership, that strong communication and collaboration is going to be really helpful for when something does happen.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think those are all great. I know, um, it's kind of like when you're hiring an employee and it's like you start putting all your wishes on them. I think sometimes it's the same with a vendor. Like, I just want this taken care of, and you start like not communicating your expectations as well because you're just kind of like, I just want this off my plate. So making sure you have a process of like how you evaluate the risk of that vendor and what data they're going to have access to and all those different things. It just needs to kind of be built in your process from the beginning.
Yeah, and I think building on that, relevant to QMS changes, relevant to tooling changes, finding a partner that can be that center of excellence for you. Consults are an amazing thing because they work with so many other partners. They see what is the good, what is the bad. And so finding those partners that have worked with similar companies, similar size companies that have the experience of managing, if you're a large company, managing cybersecurity at scale. If you're a small company, managing cybersecurity on a tighter budget. So finding the right partner for who you are is critical. And then on kind of the risk assessment of suppliers, certifications, ensuring that you understand who the cybersecurity leadership is at that company. Have they been in the industry for 10 years? Have they managed infrastructure of a similar size? How long have they managed the existing infrastructure? So those are all, I think, critical things to consider as you work with third-party vendors.
Thank you for those suggestions and the insight. I'd like to turn over to Q&A. We have some really good questions. One of them, I love this question. They're asking, can you talk about cybersecurity risk for legacy devices and how to mitigate such risks?
Sure. Yeah, it's obviously a big problem. So these legacy devices, again, going back to identify, make sure you have a good list of all your assets and you know which ones are legacy and which ones aren't maintained anymore. There's no more firmware updates or patches. And then, ideally you're going to segment them off and limit their exposure, either to your other resources or from the internet. And just, you just got to figure out like what's the bare minimum this thing needs. Obviously with zero trust networking kind of being the way forward for most things now, it should be just zero trust networking. You're not allowed to communicate to anything unless, specifically authorized. But if it's a piece of equipment you need or a device you need, um, you want to try and isolate it off on its own. So if something did happen, it's not exposed.
Yeah, and I think a good framework to think about legacy devices is what are the ways in which we can control cybersecurity risk? There's design changes, which typically are not possible with these legacy devices if they don't have an easy update or patch path. There are compensating controls, which we can communicate to our users on how to modify their use of the device, modify the use environment of the device to reduce cyber risk. And then the third is kind of the thing we don't want to resort to, but is risk transfer. So ensuring that we've documented how this particular device introduces a particular risk to the organization that is implementing it. So those are kind of the three ways you can think about reducing the risk of legacy devices.
And then what are the best practices for identifying potential threats? So they're talking about threat landscape monitoring. Would be tools or anything else you'd suggest?
Yeah, I would say tools are great. They obviously make it a lot more efficient. But it's funny because I get, it seems like once your phone knows what you like to look at, so like I constantly have threats on my phone, like threats of stories about threats. So it's like kind of become my threat intelligence phone. But having systems that kind of feed you threat intelligence that you can then take action on. As far as like what threats you have in your environment, again, kind of back to understanding what your data flow diagram would look like and what your infrastructure looks like, and kind of walking through a lot of that and just thinking about risks at each point. We've had a client recently that you would probably think they were fairly secure, but then they had one server exposed to the internet, but then that server tied back to the internal network to their domain controller, which has all their user accounts on it. So if that thing got breached, it did have basically would get them into the internal network. So walking through all those and understanding like, okay, what access does this device have? And then just you kind of identify risk at each thing. And then lastly, I would just say doing tabletop exercises also helps out a lot. Just going through your incident response plan. There's lots of scenarios out there on CISA's website. You can kind of walk through those and think about what you haven't thought about yet, like what threats are potentially in our environment based on those exercises. And then people might get creative in the exercise and come up with ideas of their own that's make it a little more fun, I guess.
I think Jason covered it well. I think I'll just kind of harp on engaging all the stakeholders in the process because everyone has kind of a different view and a different set of information that is valuable as we do threat modeling and develop these architectures. So ensuring that you engage everyone involved, if we're doing product security, everyone involved in developing the product, that's critical.
Well, there's a question which kind of plays devil's advocate, and they're saying it all seems fragmented and someone has to interpret the QMS and then provide support, and then companies like Ketrix provide expertise or support in this area. Integrating these external vendors just adds on to this overall cybersecurity risk. Any thoughts on that?
I think that kind of goes back to a little bit of ground when we were talking about, using third parties and, bringing on vendors. Yes, it could, introduce some additional issues or challenges, but again, that's vetting your suppliers really well. Trying to find the ones that fit your culture and fit your needs the best, as well as maybe finding companies that work together and partner together, because then, they already work well together. They are all aware of, each other's processes and systems, and that can help alleviate some of those risks or worries if there's already partnerships in place. So that's some of the things that I know when I'm working with a small to mid-sized company that's in the life sciences looking for something like this. I try to leverage partnerships to support them better. So to me, that's a way to kind of help alleviate a little bit of that. But also don't forget to do your risk assessment, right? You're introducing new people, look at the risks that they could possibly introduce. So, it's a living document that I always say, don't ever forget about it. And also having proper agreements in place.
Yeah, I think it's about finding the right expertise, the best expertise for a particular area. And if that means you need to go to kind of two different groups for that, understanding the risk, like Christy is mentioning, is very important. But one thing I'll highlight relevant to this is that as you do consider modifying process to support new regulations, it's important to consider the tooling in conjunction with that. The product development process has become so complex with cloud and AI that you need a substantial amount of tooling to help improve the documentation process, improve the speed at which you can deliver your products. So engaging both of these stakeholders early on in the process as you think about modifying the way that you're complying with cybersecurity regulations is important.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's getting more and more complex, so then you get more and more specialties and tools and services that you have to integrate. I think, I guess going way back to the beginning, thinking about doing an assessment or a gap analysis and understanding your gaps before you just start picking, because sometimes people just they know they need one thing, so they go get that one thing, and then they, oh yeah, I need that other thing, then they go get the other thing. Like having that full picture from the beginning that you can kind of put a strategy together. Then as you're talking to vendors and partners, they might be able to address three or four of those things instead of like you hit one at a time. Now you got four different solutions instead of one solution that addresses four problems, and kind of just approach it, I guess, more strategically. But then ultimately, I feel like you need some tool or system that kind of brings all the data together in one place, at least as close as possible, and then processes that make sure you look at that data on a regular basis. I don't know if that helps at all.
Well, that's helpful, and I want to thank. We're almost at 11 past at the hour point. I want to genuinely thank you all for being here, taking the time to share some of the insights and strategies of how companies can create protocols and procedures for cybersecurity within their organizations. And what we'll do is this webinar was recorded. We'll share that with the attendees, and then we'll also share your contact information that way. If anybody needs to get a hold of any of you, they can do so. Once again, thank you so much for your time, and to our attendees, thanks a lot.